One sport, millions of voices. This is Rugby Unity.
This is Rugby Unity. I am David Pembroke and my co-host Eddie Jones will join me in a moment from Japan. But first of all, a big thanks to all of you who responded to last week's episode, particularly our deep dive into what rugby can learn from Formula One. And we had a number of questions and comments. And one of them was from Hamid Batola, who said, fan connection to the athletes is the key. Like you said, it's not about the racing. In the same way, rugby has always been about the people. More nations and clubs need to produce content so their fans can care about the people involved, which will make them care more about the sport. England is probably the best at this with their Next Level and Red Roses series. The series really took off when Eddie was there and we got some great access. The ABs do this well too with their long-form videos, but the Wallabies, they don't do this at all with the exception of the Stand series. As an American, I had to use VPNs to find this. Would have been simpler on YouTube. The USA also puts out very little content. Can the average American rugby fan name the Eagles players? Probably not. I understand it's expensive, but it's a great investment. So Eddie Jones, there you go. Another person recognising the innovation of all of that series that was produced all those years ago when you were in charge of England.
Good to hear from America too, mate, isn't it?
Well, it is. It is, and we'll come to that because I think as we continue to look at the future prosperity of the game and the World Cups there in 31 and 33, it's going to be such a key market for us. And over the next couple of weeks, we will continue to look at North American rugby because it does play such a key role in the future prosperity of the sport. But the big news out of the World Rugby meeting a week or so ago was that the red card, or the 20-minute red card trial will continue. So likely to be adopted or will be adopted in all elite competitions. I presume you are a supporter of the 20-minute red card?
Well, I think everyone's massively frustrated by it, mate. I think, generally speaking, I'd say that 85% of the world rugby support it. They see it as being sensible. There's 15% that don't, and they hold the fort, mate. And it's one of the problems in rugby. We don't get change in the game quickly. We still have this. What are we trialling now? The only thing we're trialling is the political system, right? How they can get the votes to get it through. That's the only thing we're trialling. I think everyone in rugby agrees it's sensible for the game. No one wants to see, particularly in rugby, 15 versus 14 or 15 versus 13 makes the game particularly difficult because of the importance of the scrum contest, and to have players moved out of that makes it really difficult. Just massive frustration, mate. And I think, again, World Rugby, I don't know how they do it, but obviously their decision-making process is not right for the modern times. It's just too slow. And you as an Australian living in Canberra with NRL, how quickly they make changes to the game. Like the CEO gets on the show on Monday night and they make a change to the game that improves the game immediately.
That has proven to be the case in the changes of the governance around sport, not only here in Australia, but obviously the major sports in the US. They have executive control and decision-making. They've moved to commission structures where the commissions are in charge of making decisions. And the stakeholders are the stakeholders. The stakeholders aren't the decision makers. And I think the thing with this red card trial is that it's now going to be adopted in all elite competitions. The final decision won't be made until 2026 about whether or not it's introduced. So I think this is probably going to be World Rugby's biggest challenge, is speed to decision. As it competes for a share of people's time and attention in terms of speeding up the game, making the game more appealing, that if they can't make decisions quickly, the competition is just going to outrun them. And it is a major concern. And I'm not sure how FIFA does it, or I'm not sure how IOC is able to do it, and whether their executive has more ability to make decisions. But it would seem absurd that we've now got to wait until 2026 for a law that is now been proven to be popular, certainly popular with the fans. It has had no real impact on safety in terms of players, and in terms of the discipline aspects. It keeps the game, or you can deal with matters that need to be dealt with appropriately after the game. So, yeah, I think that's something to put there on the table as we look to, again, this podcast is about securing the future prosperity of the game. But if they can't make decisions faster than 2026 or a couple of years out, I just don't know where that's going to leave us.
Yeah, and we had the same situation with the Moor, mate. The Moor went to the one stop and use it to try to speed the game up. From what I've heard, that everyone agreed again that should happen, and it hasn't happened because there's one or two countries that say no, and they hold up the process. This whole thing about having a old-fashioned committee. What did Jack Gibson say? The great rugby league coach. If you got a good idea, give it the committee and they'll punch holes in it. And I think that basically sums up how World Rugby runs. And we know it's difficult to modernise. Because committees are there because people like to have their time in the sun for the honour and the hard work they put in the game, and it's almost like a contradiction to say to get rid of that when we talk about the game of rugby. But there needs to be some way to still reward those people for doing their hard work and giving them a chance to sit on the committee, but also improve the decision-making of the game. And that's the big challenge. And, we're lucky got a bright bloke in Robbo who, as the head of World Rugby, would understand that. If anyone's going to find the solution to it, he will. But he needs to get on his horse, mate.
Indeed. Well, Phil Waugh has returned from those meetings and in London, and he was reflecting on the entertainment of the game. And I pulled out a couple of quotes from a story that I read, and maybe he's listening, because a couple of quotes from the story in the Sydney Morning Herald from Phil Waugh. One says, "Our preference is we put fans at the centre of everything we do." And a second quote that he made was, "So we want to ensure that we've got the fans at the centre of every decision that we make." So clearly he was part of those decisions and discussions in London. So let's hope that the conversation about putting the fans at the centre of decision making is right. Some other news out of the World Rugby meeting was that they have signed a deal for the next 3 World Cups and for the rest of World Rugby's content with the giant American broadcaster CBS, which owns the Paramount streaming service. So that's good news in terms of rugby being able to be shown in the North American market. And there's the MLR have done their deal with ESPN Plus. And there's another streamer that's called Flow Sports that's based in Austin in Texas. And they cover Super Rugby, the Autumn Series, the European Championship Rugby, the European Challenge Cup Rugby, the Top 14, the Premiership. So there's lots of opportunities in North America for people to be consuming television content, the rugby content. So let's hope that more of them take that opportunity up. And interestingly, just as another note, in terms of television ratings in the United States, so for the month of April, so just past, for the 3rd month in a row, YouTube remains the dominant television platform with a 12.4% share, followed by Disney with 10.7%, Paramount with 8.9%, NBC Universal at 8.2%, and Netflix at 7.5%. But to think that YouTube is now the most popular television viewing platform in North America I find that stunning in terms of the rapid change in the way people consume content.
Well, I think that identifies one of the biggest problems in rugby. You talk to anyone about rugby, it lacks content. It lacks that ability to keep fans engaged over a week. We spoke about it last week. That how does rugby produce more content?
Well, it has to have more competitions, and we'll come to that in a minute because they're.
But there can't be more. There can't be more competitions, mate. We've got every week of the year being played by rugby. We know our top players now are playing to the absolute max. They play 30 games a year. That's a lot of games. They don't have any more time for any extra competitions. So there's enough rugby out there. The problem is, why isn't there content produced from the rugby?
And when you talk about content, are you talking about like the shoulder programming that goes with it, or in terms of the actual games themselves?
Well, I probably just borrow from NRL and AFL, where you say, the start of the week they have the review program, the Tuesday they have the selection program, injury updates, Wednesday they do the preview, and then Thursday they have some sort of human interest type program. So for a week they engage the fans, they keep them updated. Like, mate, in rugby to find out about injured players, it's like Secret Service. Like the CIA must still be operating in rugby, mate. Like, we had a situation here where I'm trying to find out about a player that's potentially in our squad that's been a regular player, and the club won't let us know. So if we don't know, how do the fans know? Like, it's just, and this is how rugby's been for a long time. We've had this, almost like secret handshake type society, and it needs to change, mate.
But how do you change it? How do you bring about that cultural change that builds the confidence and builds the priority, again, by putting the fan at the centre of decisions, by saying, well, the fans need to know that this is taking place? Maybe that's one lever that can be used to improve the openness and the volume of content and interest. But I would say that here in Australia, the broadcaster Stan does that now. They have programs on Monday, on Tuesday, on Wednesday, on Thursday, and they do try to look at the injury updates. So certainly in some markets it's improving, but whether or not it's across the board, I don't know.
No, good. But it always comes down to leadership, mate. If you got someone at the top that's prepared to make changes, then it'll happen. And in a sport like rugby, if you're a person who wants change in rugby, you've got to be prepared to get cut. That's the thing. You can't want to be in the game a long time because the traditional forces will get you. Got Hamish McClellan, Ian Ritchie at English Rugby, all those guys that have a real vision and a real way of doing things differently. They eventually, the system gets them. The traditional old boys get them. And it's the beauty of our game, and also the thing that holds it back is the tradition of the game. But it also, we talk about the tradition and the values and how important it is, but it's also the thing that holds the game back. And clearly at the moment, we're not competing well against other sports in this sort of area.
No, I would absolutely agree with you. I think we've got a long way to travel, but maybe one of the other innovations that could attract some attention is the announcement of a Rugby Club World Cup that was announced by the chairman of the EPCR this week, that there in the years 2028 and 2032, the top 8 European teams, the top 7 Super Rugby teams, and 1 from Japan every 4 years. Clearly no clash with the Nations Cup, no clash with the World Cups. But Eddie Jones is someone who used to coach in Super Rugby and has coached in Japan and coached in the Northern Hemisphere. What's your thoughts about a World Club Rugby Championship?
Well, I think it's fantastic for the clubs, and depending on where it's held in the season, I think it could be fantastic for the fans. But you think about the World Club Championship in soccer, like, it doesn't really hold a special place in the season. I don't think many people would say, "Oh, do you remember that final in the World Cup?" It hasn't been because at the end of the day, the domestic competitions for those teams remain the most important thing, and are they able to treat those competitions seriously? We even see in the Heineken Cup, the French teams who are in the top Heineken Cup, if they're struggling in top 14, they don't take that competition seriously, because if they don't do well in the top 14, they don't have any other competitions post that. So, in principle, great idea. When in the season's going to happen, and again, how do the players play more games, mate? We're asking our top players to play more games again. We want more test matches. We've got 12 test matches. They play, they've got room for 18 domestic games now. They've got another 2 or 3 World Club Championship games. So I think it's a really good idea, but the logistics of it and the practicality is going to be the difficult thing.
Interesting. Yeah, I remember the first conversations about this North versus South way back in the days of the Brumbies, that we were talking about it back then, and it wasn't sort of a competition. I think the idea was that, whoever was the top team in the South would travel to play the top team in the North, and it'd be a one-off game, played at Twickenham was the first conversations that I remember being involved in. And obviously, the idea has sat there for many, many years. But this, if you've got, 16 teams playing, you need time. So you need about, a month, I would imagine, or at least a month, really, I would have thought. So, this crowded calendar, and again, this is all part of it, isn't it? The global calendar and being able to find where these spaces are, because I don't think there's, as you say, we can't ask any more of the players. And when you put in all of the travel that goes with it and everything else and the rest that's required to keep them healthy, certainly the players need to be at the table. But I know there is enthusiasm from Super Rugby for this particular idea, and clearly there's support in Europe. So maybe another good innovation there. A final thing, Eddie Jones, I noticed that Warren Gatland has been appointed as an advisor to Penarol, the Uruguayan team who are currently ranked number 1 in the Super Rugby Americas as they head into the final parts of their competition. So good to see a high-profile coach being involved in the Super Rugby Americas competition.
The great thing about someone like Warren is he's going to give something back to the game. And Uruguay over the last probably 10 years has been the most improved team, one of the most improved teams in World Rugby, and I'm sure he'll help the team do well. South America is certainly a developing area in rugby. Like I was watching, because we're playing Hong Kong, I watched Brazil play the other day, 3 games of Brazil, and they're almost the opposite of their football team. Their football team was fast. We know about their football team, and these are big, heavy guys. They must be the biggest team in the world, mate. Their front row must be like 700, 800 Ks. They are huge, and they want to maul everything. They haven't got too much movement in them, but there's not too much, rhythm and tempo in their game, but there's a lot of beasts. But they've been doing pretty well, Brazil. They've come up the ranks, and so you've got Brazil now, you've got Uruguay, Paraguay's doing quite well. We've had Argentina. So that area is probably developing more than North America at the moment.
Which is interesting, isn't it? Because again, as we think about the future prosperity of rugby union around the world, I think we need to pay more attention to what's happening in South America. And again, in the weeks and months and years ahead as we continue to look at it. Anyway, they're going into their finals in the next few weeks. So it'll be interesting, and we will feature and let people know who is the top team in Super Rugby Americas. But one more thing before we head on, one more bit of news is that the First Nations Pacifica coaching team has been announced for the Lions Tour, and your mate Glenn Eller will be involved. Todai Kefu is the head coach. Tana Umanga is involved, and Simon Raului is involved as well. So they'll have a good time. They've got a number of very, very good blokes who are on that coaching team.
They'll definitely have a good time, because Todai was up here coaching at Kintetsu in Japan, where Quade Cooper and Will Jenner playing probably the last parts of their career. And they've actually got a relegation or a relegation promotion game this weekend to decide whether they stay in First Division or go up to First Division or stay in Second Division. So he's a forwards coach for them, but I think he's moving on at the end of the season, and he did a great job, Todai at Tonga, he coached there, I think maybe 3 World Cups. He gave a lot back to the game there. He's a good character. Glenn's coached all around the world. You couldn't meet a better bloke. And then Tana's the same, really good fellow. So though, the players playing in that team will have a great rugby experience. And I think, that's again part of why rugby's so good.
After the break, our deep dive this week is with you, our community, who has been writing to us, where we feature answers to your questions.
Rugby Unity.
Okay, so Rugby Sevens has some momentum, but in Great Britain, it's being sidelined. And we have a listener question this week, and I've got to say, it hits to the point. James Oliver has asked us about Rugby Sevens and why it continues to get such a raw deal in the UK. James first fell in love with sevens at the 2002 Commonwealth Games. Fast forward to today, it's an Olympic sport played all over the world. But in James's view, it feels like the home unions still treat it like a second-class citizen. So, the few questions, Eddie, for you. First up, why don't England, Scotland, Wales and Ireland take sevens seriously? We're in the Olympics, we've got talent, but we've got no real funding, no profile and barely any presence unless it's a bad news story. What is going on?
Well, I think it's very simple, mate. And I don't agree it hasn't been taken seriously. If you look at England particularly, they ran a full-time program. They were based in Lensbury. They had full-time coaches. They were one of the best resource teams in the world and did very well. And that led on to the Great Britain team, which did well. I think, at the Olympics, maybe 2 or 3 Olympics ago, they either won a gold or got a silver. They went very close. So it has not been taken seriously. It's been taken very seriously. But now there's huge, as we've spoken about, huge budget problems for national unions. And something's got to give. Every union's looking at the teams they have, and they've got to just prioritise what's going to be the best for the rugby community in their area.
So a second question now comes from Dylan in London. Would love to hear your thoughts on the idea of merging league and union. To the average sports fan, the two games look 90% the same. Well, they in fact were the same game until about 1895 when they split, but they compete for players, money and attention. What if we took league's simplicity and excitement, combined it with union's global reach and traditions and built a hybrid game? It would reinvigorate the sport and create new rivalries like Brumbies v Raiders, St Helens versus Saracens. I'm well aware that there are several complications to this, but would love to hear your take on this. So, Eddie Jones, the two games coming together, your thoughts?
So, they're just two completely different sports. Why don't we merge baseball and cricket? Watching the state of origin, the contrast between rugby and rugby league couldn't be more obvious. You got one game that's basically a continuity game. Like rugby league is a complete continuity game. They took out all the contests of the game. They took the contests out of the play the ball. They took the contests out of the ball carry. They took the contests out of the scrum. So you got this fast, continuous game that's like a physical version of basketball. Whereas rugby is the ultimate contest game that you try to play with continuity. So it's completely different. Watching the State of Origin last time, you make a great carry and the player gets up, plays the ball, right? In rugby, there's a contest to tackle the player, which is the same as rugby league. But then you got another contest on the ground, which involves another set of skills before you can continue to attack. And that's the complete difference of the game. Complete difference of the game. And why we would want to merge the games when we've got two great games it's beyond me.
Okay, next question is from Lucy, and she asks, what is something you've learned from rugby that can be applied to greater life?
Well, I think, rugby is the ultimate team game. And I think, whenever you want an organisation to do well, you've just got to look at a rugby team that when you've got 15 players play together, I think Bob Dwyer used to say it's like a symphony playing. Everything moves, the drums beat at the right time, the trumpet goes at the right time. And it's the same principles as working in life, that, if you can get people aligned, get a common enough purpose, get a common enough way to do it, then you can do good things, and you can do things above what you thought you were capable of doing. And for you?
If you're enjoying it, you'll perform. So I think that's something that rugby's taught me, that I've seen over many, many years of being involved in high-performing teams, that if you're enjoying what you're doing, you are going to produce your best performance, your best outputs. And I think you can take that from rugby. Well, that's certainly something I learnt in rugby, and take it into your day-to-day life, that if you are at work and you are enjoying your work and what you're doing, you will generally perform pretty well. So that would be a lesson for me. Now, the final question, this time from Tom Gillespie from Ireland. And Tom asks, thoughts on Stephen Larkham as a coach?
His experience at Munster has added another dimension to his coaching. He was always a very intelligent guy, great attacking player, and understood the mechanics of attack very well. But I think having coached in Munster for a period of time, he understood, he got a greater appreciation of how you can play the game differently. And we've seen the Brumbies morph from it's probably over a period of time, but morph into a much more set piece orientated team than previously, where set piece, yes, was part of their game, but not a driving advantage of their game. And I think Steve's borrowed that from Munster, and is evolving into a very, very serious coach.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think he's authoritative, he's thoughtful, and he is developing a very strong team. And off the field, he's building his confidence. He's generally quite a shy and retiring type. But I think you're starting to see that authority come through and that confidence come through. And I think the players are feeding off that, and they can see his composure in the way that he manages himself. And I think he also inspires them, in that he is somebody who has done great things as a player and is now doing great things as a coach. So I think he is really setting himself up. And I think the other great thing is, at the moment, he's being very patient about his opportunities, and he's not sort of rushing, and he's working through this project here at the Brumbies, and he is making progress every year, very, very good progress every year with this team, and I think he's learning from that. So I think that is a sign of maturity, and I'm certain that he'll go on to greater things into the future. Well, listen, that might wrap us up for another week, Eddie, I think. To you, the audience, thanks again for sending through all of those questions, and please keep sending them through. Share your comments, your suggestions. Don't forget to follow us on social media and subscribe on your favourite podcatcher. That makes sure that you will get all the updated editions as they come. And as always, if you could, please leave us a rating or a review. That helps us to be found. So next week, we're going to be speaking about the rise of women's rugby with Wallaroos player Emily Chancellor. So please give us your thoughts and questions that you might like to ask Emily. So she'll be joining Eddie and I next week on Rugby Unity. So until next week, please be kind to each other. I'm David Pembroke. He's Eddie Jones. And it's bye for now.